Germany attacks Poland. The date, September the 1st, 1939. The Second World War has begun. Poland's second largest city, Lodz, is occupied on September the 8th. Lodz is incorporated into the German Reich and renamed Litzmannstadt. Over 200,000 Jews live in Lodz. Lodz is ruled by Nazi terror. Jews are murdered and abused. Jewish men are captured in the streets, thrown onto trucks, and sent away to slave labor. The Jews live in constant fear. No one knows who will be the next victim. Discrimination, assault, and even murder were not new to the Polish Jew, but few suspect that the process now begun will lead Poland's 3 million Jews to industrialized extermination. Chaim Rumkowski, a former textiles manufacturer, belonged to the periphery of the Jewish leader group and was active in the work of the Jewish congregation. He had an ordinary interest in religion. Rumkowski was the supervisor of a Jewish orphanage. German terrorism forced the more prominent Jewish leaders to flee. Rumkowski was among those who remained in Lodz. On the 1st of October, Rumkowski proposes that the Jews themselves select a group of able-bodied men each day. These will be presented to the Germans for forced labor. Rumkowski successfully convinces the other Jewish leaders that his proposal will alleviate German terror. And Rumkowski is right. The unchecked attacks on Jews become fewer. People dare to venture out into the streets again. But on the 23rd of September, the German decree is handed down. Throughout Poland, the Germans establish so-called Jewish councils. They enlist Jews who are forced by the Nazis to accept the appointment. The Germans call the Jewish council leader Elder of the Jews. The organizing of Jewish councils is to become a significant component in German extermination strategy. The Jews themselves are to be induced to tie the nooses around their own necks. On the 14th of October, the Germans appoint Rumkowski as Elder of the Jews in Lodz. His maneuverability is determined entirely by the Nazis. Rumkowski tries to organize social welfare. Among other things, he sets up soup kitchens for the poor. School children are to get free lunches. Rumkowski believes that the worst is now over. But on the 10th of November 1939, the terror begins again. The Germans murder and burn. 4 of Lodz's largest synagogues are destroyed. Shortly afterwards, Rumkowski receives a German order. All remaining Jewish leaders are to be called together immediately. They are seized, humiliated, and violated, only to be murdered afterwards. The Germans spare Rumkowski and a few others. Rumkowski receives orders to carry out a census. All of Lodz's Jews are to be registered. Name, age, address, occupation. To Rumkowski, this appears to be a meaningless and harmless task. On the 8th of February, the next order comes. The Jews are to be assembled in a ghetto. The ghetto is to be situated in Baluti, the worst of the slum areas in Lodz. The Jews are systematically evicted from Lodz. But the process is too slow. On March the 6th, the Germans shoot 200 Jews at random. Frightened, the Jews rush into the ghetto area. By May the 1st, 1940, all the Jews of Lodz have been gathered in the ghetto. The sanitary conditions are vile. An average of 5 people live in each room. On May the 10th, the Germans sealed the ghetto completely. Lodz was the first large ghetto established by the Germans in Poland. A special currency is introduced. This money is completely worthless outside the ghetto. It is forbidden to trade in any other currency than ghetto money. Rumkowski is ordered to exchange the Jews' money and valuables. For these, Rumkowski will be able to buy food from the Germans, and the Germans set the prices. By doing this, the Germans confiscate the Jews' assets. Food shortage is the paramount problem in the ghetto. Food becomes the hard currency of the ghetto. Rumkowski cannot count upon any help from the outside. Round the ghetto, the Germans prepare space for so-called Volkdeutschen, Germans with Polish citizenship. The establishment of these honorary Germans means that the Jews are surrounded by a hostile and dangerous element. The ghetto is most efficiently isolated. For black market operators, it's not even worth the trouble of trying to sell food to the ghetto Jews. They can only be paid in worthless ghetto money. In order to ration and distribute the meager provisions with fairness, administration is necessary. Scarcity and misery are the basis of the ghetto bureaucracy. In order to control the distribution of food and maintain order in the food queues, it is necessary to police them. Rumkowski organizes a police force. Laws and courts are established. Criminal offenses are more or less confined to petty larceny of food. The Jews begin to feel the sting of starvation. Slowly, the death rate increases. Rumkowski has an idea. The Jews can be kept alive through work. Rumkowski contacts Hans Bibov, head of the German ghetto authorities. Bibov is positive to the proposal and encourages Rumkowski. And Bibov gets support from Berlin to develop ghetto industry. The organizing is begun. The ghetto can purchase raw materials from the Germans. The Jews convert these materials into finished products, mainly textiles, and the Germans pay Rumkowski with food and new raw materials. Bibov is anxious to develop industry in the ghetto. For the Germans, the ghetto industry becomes most profitable, especially for Bibov, who, with his position as middleman between the ghetto and its German customers, can divert large sums straight into his pocket. For Rumkowski, the industrialization of the ghetto is a chance to obtain food for its inhabitants. Rumkowski believes that industrializing the ghetto will save the Jews. Through their work, they can support the German war economy, which is becoming more and more strained. The Jews of Lodz are to be indispensable for the Germans. Rumkowski's ambition is to create a community where the Jews will be able to survive the war, a community with all the functions of a society. Rumkowski builds up an educational system in the ghetto, nursery schools, and recreational activities. He organizes medical care with a hospital and geriatric care for the aged, a postal service for mail within the ghetto, a fire brigade, and cultural activities, libraries, theater, concerts, and lectures. Rumkowski's manifesto is spread by posters and in the ghetto's own newspaper, Ghetto Zeitung. Work, bread, care and welfare for the children, the aged and the sick, law and order. And in order to promote all this, the ghetto bureaucracy grows constantly with new departments and divisions. The Germans need Rumkowski as leader of the ghetto Jews. Rumkowski is to be seen as responsible for the starvation, sickness and hardships. Any protests from the inhabitants of the ghetto are to be directed against the Jews' own leader and not the Nazis. In the ghetto there are different views about how to protect yourself from the Nazis. But neither the remnants of the Zionist nor the socialist parties are able to offer a credible alternative to Rumkowski's policies. Spontaneous strikes and demonstrations against Rumkowski break out. However, Rumkowski succeeds in crushing all resistance. He emerges even more than before the indisputable leader of the ghetto. But Rumkowski's maneuverability is minimal. The Germans make all decisions, and if Rumkowski questions anything, they threaten to kill him. Or Bibov personally inflicts physical punishment on him. Lodz is a textile city. There's no shortage of qualified labor, and Rumkowski builds up diversified production in the ghetto. But regardless of how much Rumkowski increases the productivity of the ghetto's industry, he can never cope with the starvation. Through their price system, the Germans have complete control over the Jews' food supply. Low prices for the ghetto products, high prices for raw materials, and high prices for the food the ghetto can buy, means that the ghetto is caught in a vicious whirlpool of price cuts. Rumkowski utilizes the most modern industrial methods. The working pace becomes faster and faster. But however hard the work, there is no increase of food. On the contrary, starvation increases, and the ghetto's death rate rises constantly.
Human excrement, feces. They are called the fecalists. They empty the ghetto's lavatories. An extra piece of bread for the repulsion and the stench. Often entire families pull these wagons. The uneven street tosses the contents of the wagons. It splashes, trickles. A trail of excrement marks their route through the streets of the ghetto.
Rumkowski creates a system where food and work are closely linked together. Those who don't work don't get a food ration, and then death by starvation awaits them. The state of health of the ghetto inhabitants is so low that a slight infection often leads to death. 60% of the ghetto's inhabitants have tuberculosis. One typhus epidemic is followed by another.
A family member dies of starvation. Keeping the death a secret means an extra ration of bread. To avoid becoming the next victim, you hide the corpse. During the winter, when it is cold, weeks can pass before the stench from the corpse seeps into the neighbors. The punishment from the ghetto courts is severe.
85% of the able-bodied work in ghetto industries. Ghetto bureaucracy swells. 13,000 people are employed within the administration. The Jewish police force is enlarged. Rumkowski organizes a department of security police, Sonderabteilung. In addition to being Rumkowski's personal lifeguard, the security police infiltrate groups suspected of opposing Rumkowski. The ghetto civil servants are relatively at an advantage. Those who are close to Rumkowski are privileged. They have access to more food than the others. When the shortage of food increases, corruption becomes rampant, mainly among the police and those who are in charge of food distribution. Rumkowski tries to fight the dishonest elements within his administration, but without much effect. He also depends on them for support. Life in the ghetto becomes better and better organized. Rumkowski gives priority to the sanitary conditions. The streets are kept clean. The fecalists collect the excrement from the ghetto's lavatories regularly. Those who are sick do not die in the streets of the ghetto. They die in the poor but well-organized hospitals. Rumkowski's aim was to establish a permanent ghetto. His work principles would force the Germans to declare the ghetto a work camp, and thereby enable the Jews to survive the war.
A German street cleaves the ghetto into two segments. Along each side of the street, barbed wire marks the borders of the ghetto. A well-guarded wooden bridge joins both sections. Rounds are fired at random up towards the bridge. The bullets are to create an atmosphere of submission and compliancy. Calm is precariously balanced by terror. No one may think himself safe.
Rumkowski was a leader with socio-political ambitions. He wanted to create a community where Jewish culture and nationalism could flourish, a community where burdens as well as joys would be shared equally. Business and industry were to be conducted by the community. Care for the children, the aged, and the sick were to be of primary concern. Rumkowski envisioned himself as the fatherly savior of his people and their guide through this, the most difficult period in the history of the Jews. Artists were engaged to paint portraits of the elder of the Jews. The ghetto newspaper published poems in Rumkowski's honor. Rumkowski added writers and photographers to his administration to record his works for posterity. Rumkowski also printed stamps engraved with his portrait. But this was too much for the Germans, and the stamps were forbidden. They were never used. Albums paying homage to Rumkowski are also produced. These albums depicted life in the ghetto. In all fields, there are descriptions of Rumkowski's deeds and actions as the creator of the community. The turning point is a staggering blow. The Germans have completed one of the first extermination camps, Chelmno, now ready to receive the Jews. Trucks converted into gas chambers were used. Construction had also begun on the large death factories. Slave workers are building Auschwitz. In December 1941, the Germans issue an order for the first deportations from the Lodz ghetto. The deportations are called resettlements. They tell the Jews that they're being sent to work somewhere else. 20,000 Jews are to be resettled. Rumkowski protests to the Germans. He tries at least to reduce the number. He proposes to the Germans that they be satisfied with 10,000. 20,000 would reduce the ghetto's productivity too much, Rumkowski argues. But the Germans know that it is among the least productive that Rumkowski will be forced to select the stipulated number of Jews. Maintaining productivity was, in fact, Rumkowski's only weapon, his strategy for survival. The ghetto Jews learn of the resettlement in January 1942. Addressing the inhabitants, worried and frightened, Rumkowski pleads for help with this, the most difficult task: the selection of ghetto Jews to be resettled. There is a proposal that the old and the sick should go first. Others think that only complete families should be sent away, so that the weak can get help from the stronger. Rumkowski asks the rabbis for advice. The rabbis convene but cannot reach any decisive opinion. Rumkowski finds himself walking on a tightrope. On one side, there is the Germans' irrevocable demand for 20,000 Jews. On the other, how can he act so that the Jews do not lose confidence in their leader? Time is running out, and Rumkowski will soon be forced to present a proposal. First, the criminals. One conviction in the ghetto's police records, if only for a slight misdemeanor, is enough for a person to be resettled. The next group which risks selection are families in which no one works and which are dependent on ghetto welfare. There is another group which risks getting onto the deportation lists: Rumkowski's enemies, those whom Rumkowski claimed worked against him and against his plans. A special resettlement committee is formed. Information collected during the census at the beginning of the occupation becomes the basis for organizing the resettlement.
Anxiety, fear, terror. Transfer me and my wife if you wish, but leave our 18-month-old baby, writes Jacob Gershom Berkowitz in a letter to the Resettlement Committee. Wolf Eiger writes, "If the reason for my resettlement is the sentence upon my son, I would hereby like to explain the following. My son died 7 weeks ago. Therefore, I assume that my son's death removes the blame from me and my family for his offense. I work hard as a porter and am satisfied with my work." A letter from Deborah Einesman. "I assume that the reason I am to be resettled is that my husband was sent away to a work camp in Germany earlier. May I point out that it was unbearable for us to live together and that we were separated."
In an atmosphere of a state of emergency, the entire ghetto is mobilized. The ghetto's physicians examine those who are to be sent away in order to ascertain whether they are healthy enough to be resettled. There is hope that this resettlement is a single occurrence, and that if only the German demands are fulfilled, there will soon be peace and quiet in the ghetto again. Despite the fact that this is a tremendous defeat for Rumkowski's plans, the transfer is an organizational success. Everything is carried out with calm and discipline. The Jewish police maintain order. At the railway wagons, Germans take over. January the 29th, 1942, 20,000 Jews have been deported from Lodz. They are transported to Chelmno. All are murdered there. None returned. By simple means, the Germans have created an effective organization in the various ghettos where Polish Jews now live, completely isolated. Via the Jewish councils, which are based on the Jews' active participation, the actual German involvement is to be kept to a minimum. With this strategy, the Jews are to be humiliated and manipulated to perform duties which would otherwise take large numbers of German personnel. The other prerequisites for the extermination of Poles
Bread. Baking the bread is a privilege. A baker is never hungry. Bread is gold. Whenever these precious objects are transported, they are guarded by police. Each transaction is a ritual. Weighing, bookkeeping, supervision. Less than a year earlier, the ration, one loaf, had to last 5 days. Now a loaf has to last 8 days.
The health of the Jews now deteriorates so rapidly that Bibov, head of the German ghetto authorities, begins to worry about the ghetto's profitability. He writes to Berlin, "The state of health among the Jews is becoming increasingly worse. Food rations exist only on paper. The death figure is rising quickly. The Jews are dying of starvation, disease, and malnutrition." No attention is paid to Bibov's opinion. It is absolutely forbidden for the Jews to have radio sets. However, there are several receivers in the ghetto. A few people are able to listen to Allied broadcasts.
Hello, BBC.
And rumors about how the war is going for the Germans eventually spread throughout the ghetto.
I last talked about Sevastopol. And on that occasion, I said rather cautiously, so far, all the Nazi attacks have been repulsed with big enemy losses. 12 days after the start...
During 1942, the Germans encountered difficulties on the battlefield. Half of the Soviet Union is occupied, but far from defeated. The powerful United States, with its enormous industrial capacity, has entered the war. The German forces are now encountering difficulties, which gives the Jews some hope that they might be able to survive the war. But now the Germans want a ghetto where there are only Jews who can work. The others are to be removed unconditionally.
resettlement in work camps. There were those who said that the Jews who left the ghetto never came back. Someone said that someone heard on the radio from Britain that the Germans were exterminating the Jews, that the Germans built large factories for killing Jews. Others thought that it was stupid to listen to such absurd rumors, that it was propaganda from the Allies. Others still said that the Germans spread these rumors to frighten the Jews. Many said that you got more food in the work camps. Things could hardly be worse.
On the 20th of July 1942, Rumkowski issues an order that all children over 10 are to be put to work. The Germans must be shown that all of the Jews in the ghetto are productive. Those between 10 and 17 have a somewhat shorter workday than the others. No deportations are undertaken during the summer of 1942. But on the 1st of September, the terrorization is sharpened again. All of the hospitals in the ghetto are evacuated. The SS block off all the surrounding streets. The Germans order the hospital officials to evacuate the hospitals in 10 minutes. Those who protest are shot on the spot. 2,000 patients, among them 400 children, are driven away to be murdered. Shortly afterwards, the next order comes. An additional 20,000 are to be resettled. And for the first time, the Germans specify which ones. All children under 10, exceptions are made for children of those who work in the ghetto administration. All adults over 65, that is, those ghetto inhabitants who cannot be put to work. The ghetto inhabitants blame Rumkowski for the fact that the Germans want to take the children and the aged. A much saddened Rumkowski is forced to address the ghetto inhabitants. He begs them to give up their children voluntarily to avoid having the Germans take them by force. He goes on, but most important is not how many we will lose, but all those we will save. We must cut off the legs in order to save the body. You must give up your children, otherwise they will take all of us. Rumkowski tries to tone down the ghetto inhabitants' protests. He says that he has pleaded, that he has tried everything, but that the Germans are unyielding. I beg you, give me the sick. We will find